The novel is about a television critic called Iago Coates, who's like the worst person ever. And this is a chapter where he's won a ticket to visit the International Space Station in a game of poker. And anyway, Iago Coates sat in the steel-walled waiting room of a Russian missile silo, listening to a doctor argue with a general. Coates' Russian was weak, but he thought that he recognized the phrase, $15 million refund.
I hope I am dying, he thought. At least it would give me a reason to live.
Coates avoided doctors. They repelled him with their odd moustaches and furred hands that teased and prodded. You entered a doctor's office and became as a child. Lift up your shirt, the doctor ordered, and you raised your shirt, your great heave of belly billowing obscenely. Stick out your tongue, he told you, and you flopped out the sorry liver-spotted thing, choking as his dirty instruments spelunked your mouth. Coates was well aware of his atrocious health. His diet was composed of steaks and creams, rich ices and sweet melted butters, processed cheeseburgers and sweaty lasagna. Whole hectares of cattle existed to fuel his patented excesses. Entire species of rare fish, hog and steer, had expired on his plate. From the room beyond came a crack as cheek met leather and a startled cry. The door squeezed open.
Mr. Coates,
said the trim general in clear but heavily accented English.
I have to inform. You have passed our stringent medical requirements. We are pleased to welcome you travel on our Soyuz capsule.
Coates, who had been nervously sucking in his belly, released a great bottom belch of relief. What a thing, to be the first irritable bowel, the first receding penis, the first clinically obese, dangerously diabetic Coates in space. Strapped into the great bell-shaped re-entry module, Coates swigged freely from a plastic bottle of 120 proof Matrushkina and considered his decision to leave the Earth. Doubtless the old scrote would be happier rid of him, but he was not sure he could say the same. Good old Earth, with her myriad cunts and arseholes, with her billions of pounds of fine Bolivian marching powder, her millions of miles of mirrored bathroom surfaces. Earth, home of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, micro miniskirts, and Simon Cow. Thoughts of the hot young Brit snapped Coates sharply back to reality and out of his soft, teat-dispensed vodka haze. In space, there would be no television. Coates reached forward and began to struggle with his restraints. To his left and right, burly cosmonauts noticed his distress and yelled at him to calm down, their cries a hokey mixture of polite English and vile Russian curses. As the countdown drew to a close, and it seemed as though Coates would snap open the last of his restraints, only to be battered about the tiny cabin, flipped and broken like a bony blood sausage. One of the Russians wielded an emergency taser, plunging it into Coates' thigh, smouldering him into submission. The blast-off throttled his leg of lamb neck, and Coates lost consciousness, one free hand flapping and batting about like a Louisville slugger, so that the pilot had to beat it away again and again, issuing a volley of curses. Coates awoke during the clank and shuffle of docking, and immediately christened the rump of his spacesuit. Filling the hurriedly fitted adult diaper so thoroughly, a red warning light blinked at his breast, and the seal broke, strange, scandalous fumes filling the cabin. Coates freed himself and clambered forth, immune to the stench, battering his way past athletic but timid cosmonauts, determined to be the first contaminant aboard the International Space Station. Grinning, his nappy full, he clasped the arms of each of the station's shocked crew in turn.
Good to be aboard, he told them. Nice to get some distance from those commie ballerinas.
He continued, ignoring the Russian Federation tags emblazoned on their uniforms.
So, where do you keep the space head? Christ, this place is a mess,
Coates thought, squeezing his hulk past intricacies of tube and stitched foil. He floated into a cylindrical room, complex and tangled like the inside of a teenager's submarine. Coates wondered at the spill of cables, tubes and odd Byzantine instruments hooked and mounted on the station walls. Surely NASA could afford a maid. From the inside, the ISS resembled an amateur chemistry lab, odd inventions and dubious personal hygiene, creating an incubator for acne and new forms of self-abuse. Coke's cat-hungry eyes hunted out an opening on one section of the station's wall. This, then, had to be the space toilet. He was more than eager to go. The gummy crud in his suit was an itchy boil that demanded lancing. But the tiny cubicle, into which he squeezed like a pig in a tube sock, held no instructions. Before him lay a cup, like the captain's mouthpiece on an old steamship. A flat blue seat cover and a set of spirits, presumably built to restrain a pregnant space monkey. Cokes poked his suit's boots into the stirrups, securing himself against the uneasy tug of his mass, and raised the cup.
"Hello, concierge!"
He boomed into the tube.
"Hello, instructions for Mr. Cokes."
The cup stubbornly refused to respond, hissing forth a thin haze of droplets that stung Coke's eyes and tasted very much like the dregs of space piss. He dropped the codpiece in disgusted excitement.
"Shit," he thought. "How can I be expected to do my business with a floating woody?"
Flipping the toilet's lid, Coke stared into its uninviting mouth.
"You can do this," he told himself. "You have a degree in comparative literature."
It could be no more difficult than the futuristic shitters of Japan, where Cokes had spent an ecstatic weekend researching an article on hentai, enjoying the slight arses and imitation struggles of Osaka hostesses. If he could handle a toilet that spoke his weight, after a lengthy calculation, and pissed up his arse, then he could conquer the international space crapper. Cokes pushed a lever and the toilet cover flipped back. He turned and peeled off the heavy outer layers of his so-called suit, unclipping the light but confining helmet, tossing it away. Accelerated by his careless throw, the helmet bounced off a wall and smashed back against the base of his skull. Stunned, he pulled it from the air and angrily scrunched it and the suit's top half into a ball. Reaching back to touch the sting at the base of his head, Coke's fingers brushed sharp fragments of bone and came back hot and sticky. Shaking, he slapped away the deep purple bubbles that had begun to leak from the wound. As he shuffled off the suit's trousers, a fetid drunk of cack rose almost visibly around him. Cokes focused on grabbing mouthfuls of air, keeping his nose plugged with a couple of fingers. The suit was stained through at the rump, the diaper richly packed with dung. "I can do this," he thought, slipping off the cotton undershirt and slowly, oh so slowly, slinking down his gloopy diapers. His head was light from the cramped unconscious journey, a harsh slug from his helmet and the stench that rose from the diaper like the bleeding sores of a plague horse. Oozily, he stuffed the ball of shit and plastic as deep as he could into the toilet bowl. The flush, he felt sure, would take care of it. No roll of silk-soft TP was visible. Perhaps, he thought, the machine reams out the arse with a jet of warm Evian, as do the finest bidet. Cokes turned and seated himself. Loudly and with a low moan, he loosed his bowels. Taking the cup between his legs, he slipped his chode and balls between soft rubber lips and pissed a throbbing vodka gush, humming the theme to Cagney and Lacey in between slashes. Ah, there it was. The soft wash of the built-in bidet function, tenderly showering his sweaty calves and manhandled arsehole. But oddly viscous. Cokes looked down. His shit was bubbling forth, rising in a dread boil. In a panic, he grabbed the first control he could see, snapping it off in his hand. "Ah, at last," he thought, as motors began to whine and grumble. "Suction." But the shit was still rising, fast as he could release it. Oily bubbles that burst and stuck to his arms and back, a thick, solid wave soaking his midriff. Cokes tried to rise, found himself glued to the pull of the crotch pipe. His shitty pubic knot had formed a perfect seal, and the icy fingers of powerful suction held him firm to the tube. Clawing at the pipe, he rose from the toilet, formed a floating ball, the shit enveloping and drenching him in an animated scutter. Shit was everywhere, in his mouth and hair and eyes. His cock was still glued to the slurping, hungry mouth of the piss tube. From the door came a knock. A woman's voice, American. "Mr. Cokes, are you okay?" Let's stop it there.